Hello, my name is Dr. Terry Mentor, and I'm doing a lesson on how to do weddings for Dr. Clancy Hayes. I suppose this class will be taught or used in his ministerial classes, ministry classes. And the reason he asked me probably is because I was a minister for many years and I did many weddings. And I've had everything to happen in a wedding. I'm not going to tell you everything, but some of them. So I'm going to talk about just the process of how to go down through a wedding and how to do it. And the first one or the first 10 or so many when you first begin will be make you excited, a little nervous, but then you get used to them and you realize that you're in charge of a wedding. But you want to make it the very best you can. And the problem with a wedding is that you want it to be perfect for that couple as far as you're concerned. Now, there will be mess ups in the wedding when they do it. When they do something, they stumble or they. I remember someone in my wedding, when my wife and I got married, almost fell down, and my brother reached out and grabbed her arm as she was walking up the steps. And so we remember that as sort of a cute thing. And so it's okay to have mess ups, but you don't want it to be you. You want to go through the wedding and practice it until you know exactly what you're doing and how you're going to do it. And if you do make a mess up, don't worry about it. I mean, they'll laugh about it too. I just don't want that to be I don't want to remember you and not the wedding. Well, first of all, meet with a couple when they're engaged, and now they have to have counseling. Every couple does. But I am not a counselor. I don't do the counseling. I get someone else to do the counseling that's a counselor. Some of you perhaps are gifted counselors, or you can't afford to get a counselor somewhere. They can't afford it. So you have to do it. And you can get, there are lessons you can get on how to do marriage counseling. You fill out forms, and they take little tests and see if they're fit for each other or if they're a match for each other. That's one thing. I get other people to do my counseling, I always have, and they will do that for the couple. They can pay a little bit to get a professional marriage counselor to do that for them. And then they come to me, and I only deal with the wedding itself. I meet the couple, I know the couple, I know about them, I ask questions about them so I get familiar with them. I try to know, because they don't always know what they really want. So I try to catch on to who their personalities, what they're like, so that I can suggest ideas to put in there. So I meet them brief in a informal way, sitting around a table in my office or just sitting in chairs and talking. And then I bring out, usually I do the whole first session with them. I don't even mention, I ask them what type of wedding they would want, and if they say formal or informal or contemporary, I get that at the first wedding. And then the second wedding, I'll bring sometimes two weddings with me, ceremonies with me. Sometimes I'll bring more, it depends. But usually if the couple gives me an idea what they want. Now normally a couple doesn't really care that much, but I've had them to write the entire wedding ceremony out. And I just went through it. Now sometimes I don't like that, and sometimes I do like that. Sometimes it makes it like, but I've had them to have me to say things I didn't want to say. They had me kind of like preaching at them and sort of like, you shouldn't do this and that kind of thing. And so I change the wording around to fit me, then I'll read it back to them. But find a ceremony that fits them. Sometimes couples might want to do something completely out of the ballgame. You need to ask them every question. My friend did a wedding on the beach. It was a beautiful ceremony. The idea was great. The couple, he and the bride, groom was out there. The bride was to ride up in this nice car, a limousine, and get out a white limousine. It was a beautiful setting. And they're standing out there with all the decorations in the open. The sun is setting. It was marvelous. Everything was great. And then she pulls up and gets out of the car, and she's in a small bikini. And here the husband to be is dressed fine. And here's the pastor holding a note. He's like, what am I going to do with this? He did the wedding, But I would have known that before. I would have asked, about that. I ask about their dress, what they're wearing anyway, just to know. But that was a very embarrassing moment for him, at least. It would have been for me too. And now sometimes they will use wedding planners, and wedding planners are fine to use. You have to meet the wedding planner and ask them some questions to make sure they know what they're talking about, and ask them some things like that you want. Like for example, I asked them, all right, now did you ask everybody to get here at a certain time? I'm particular about that, especially for the rehearsal. And then you'll ask them things about what you're going to do, where they're coming down, who's going to walk with who. Ask them the questions before the wedding. Just take a couple of minutes with them to find out, if they kind of know their thing. And usually they do. Usually they're pretty good about that. I know what was going to happen. I know what they do. I've had so many weddings. But I'll just let them run the thing. Now, the problem might be if there's contention. If there's contention there, you don't allow that because you don't want the bride to be upset by that. And so sometimes there'll be contention with the wedding manager because they'll be wanting to get things done exactly the way they want it. And they'll have a contention sometimes with the mother, the bride's mother. And so you'll have to step in for those kinds of things. You have to let them know there won't be any of that. And if there is no wedding coordinator, you let the whole church know. It's you and her, and that she's going to, that everything's going to be done the way she wants it done. The bride's wants it done. Now, I have had many times, when the bride's mother decided she wanted things done a certain way, and but it was going contrary to what the bride had told me she wanted privately. And I always tell them, now the bride, this wedding is going to be just what the bride wants. If there's a wedding coordinator, then I just do the ceremony. But if there isn't, then I tell them, I have a list here of what the bride wants, and if you want to discuss it, I've had to do everything in that. I've even had to go over to the bride. I don't say anything embarrassing out loud, but I have gone over to the bride's mother and told her, now you just sit down and be quiet till we get through this rehearsal. Other times I've done it differently. It depends on how upset everybody is. I've gone over to the bride's mother and said things like, hey, you know what? This shows me that you're a wonderful mother. You care so much for your daughter, and I like this so much, and so I want to make sure it's going to be perfect. So let's even though you know better, it'll be better for us to do it the way she wants it done. I've done it that way. It'll be better that way, even though it won't be as perfect as you want. Nobody else will know. But there will be contention sometimes like that. The groom hardly ever cares. He just wants to get through this thing. But the bride is once in a while has certain specific things they want. I have had grooms that did care, but usually it's the bride and sometimes her mother. Usually the groom's mother, she just wants to get him out of there so she doesn't have to do his laundry anymore. So at the rehearsal, make sure you speak up and you talk, you ask questions, and you say things like, that won't work. We have to pull she's going to be wearing a trailer, She's going to have that big flowing garment behind her. You remember that. Always remember the things that they'll mess up with the flower girls. They'll mess that up. So always kind of notice those kinds of little details because and then when they line out there, tell them, put something down to remember where you're standing. They'll have everything lined out and then they'll forget it the next day. And so we usually take pieces of tape or something and put it down for everybody to stand on, and they'll do that when they line out. But there's little things you can do to help like that. But you're not necessarily the director of the wedding. The bride is the director of it. It's what she wants. But if they have a director there, then you just stay out of it, and then but you don't let them get into what you are to do as far as the sermon goes, because you've already gone over that with the couple. Now you'll have to say things during the wedding, but do it in the rehearsal and do it flamboyantly in the rehearsal. Now make the rehearsal fun. Say funny things and do cute things in the rehearsal so it's enjoyable. For example, when they kneel and things about the ring. tease them about forgetting the ring because they might forget it. I've had one time and I've done, I don't know how many weddings, but I'd had one time the bridegroom maybe, or I don't remember which one, I think it was the groom, his best man forgot the ring. And so what did we do? We just pretended. We just pulled it out and just put nothing on her finger. But nobody even, I don't think anybody even noticed it. And I told him, just take out your hand out of your pocket, hand it to him, and he takes nothing. We did a pretend ring. I think they found it later. I think it might have even been in one of his, it was on his body somewhere. But he just got, the bridegroom's best man got upset. So go through the rehearsal. Tell them when to kneel. And then when the wedding takes place, do the same thing. Tell them, okay, kneel now when you pray over them. Now, some couples won't kneel. Are they going to do communion? You'll say, now turn and do, and tell them things. But even when the wedding goes on, if they're doing something that's not going to work, tell them. Say, now I want you to do this. I want you, just say it right out loud. Nobody really cares about you doing that, and that makes it fine. Don't be afraid to ask them anything. If you see something that's not going to work, make sure you tell them. Sometimes you're wrong, and make a joke out of that. It's okay to be wrong. Some ministers bring a pencil or pen, and they'll check off as they go. I've had them to do that. I did a double wedding with this pastor up in Washington, D.C., and he had a check pen thing, and I was just a free bird. But we were doing it together, and so I skipped a step, but he went back, because he has a little checklist, but he showed it to me right up there during the wedding. Nobody, I mean, you're not the show, they are. And so then I went back and did my section in a few minutes, just got it out of order. And the bridegroom and the bride noticed, but the audience, of course, didn't. So you can bring a checklist. I don't. I don't know why. I don't get lost. But you might, and if you're the kind that does do. The other thing I wanted to remind you about is the vowels. When you do the vowels, make sure you break it up into small chunks of words, and you practice that with them. And so you go through that during the wedding, and you'll say the word, they repeat, you say it, repeat in the rehearsal. So you can kind of get their cadence down. Some cannot remember, some can remember everything. Some couples will want to remember it, but even if they do make up their own vowels, you try to have a copy there, because I cannot tell you the times I've had to help them with their memory. They think they remember it and they forget it. And so I'll sit there and I'll tell them. I've had sometimes they don't want anybody to hear it until they say it right there to each other. They don't even know, each other doesn't know what they're going to say. And so they want to surprise them. But I still ask them if they can let me look at it, because I'm standing right here and I can help them out. They don't always let me, and it's okay if they don't want to. Make sure that you practice the words in there. Now they will get nervous on those and they'll mess it up. And it's okay if they do. I've had about 3 times when I said, I'm turned to the man, I say, "I, Bill," and I hear the woman say, "I, Bill," and I go, "Oh, I, Susie," and then I just go on with her. And so it's okay. I mean, it's just a mess up. They're so nervous that they want to say it loudly and clearly, and they say it for them. The other thing is, put a sermon in there and try to make the sermon have some personal touch to it. Try to make the sermon have something in there about them, and talk about, for example, 3 different things that I try to talk about are as a point. Like, you got to change your pace of life. Things that you're not counseling them, but you want to give them some things that they can kind of remember. That now you're, as a couple, you got to change your pace, because you want you're not one anymore. And that I always put that in the wedding, that they're now you've got to be a couple. And a lot of times they remember things like that. And then I'll tell them they have to change their thinking. They have to think like 2, not think 1. Little basic things. But you're also trying to promote marriage and couples being married. And that you do in the little sermon there. And I make about a 12-minute sermon for each wedding. And I also write my prayers out. I don't ever depend on, I never depend on myself, my memory for prayers. I write them out, but I sometimes do. I get the flow, and I pray them without looking at them. I write everything out in a narrative form, but then I also underline things, and I usually don't even, my memory, if I just have a one word there, I can remember what else is in there. You do it the way you do it. After the ceremony is finished, then you got to remember now, you got to write it down in bold. You may now kiss the bride. Don't forget that. They love that. Everybody loves that. Mama loves that. And you can't forget that. And then you tell the audience, you got to remember that in bold. This is Mr. and Mrs. Smith I present to you. Now, I want to give you a couple of tips before I conclude. And one of them is that the wedding starts. The couple comes down to the very beginning, to the front aisle. And there you ask the couple, the guy is still standing, the husband or to be is standing by you, and the bride is still with her father. And there you ask their intentions. You do that first. And so everybody usually thinks, because they don't do weddings all the time, oh, they're already married. And you make them answer, I do. Who wants to do this marriage, you know? And then you ask the guy, do you want to do? You do a little covenant right there to the very beginning. And then he goes and gets her after she says that I want to be married to him. And then the husband, the father will say something like the father and I. And a lot of times we forget the mother. Don't do that. Have the bride to lean over and kiss the mother. They hardly ever kiss them. They lean over and they kind of act like they do, but it doesn't work. And so sometimes they have a veil on too. And so anyway, but they lean over and do something, touch mom or hug her a little bit, and then dad kisses them, and then they go to he brings her up to you. That's another one of the tips I wanted to mention. The time issues, make sure that things start on time, and that you come out on time. That's just really important with a wedding, and make sure you have things timed out about how long the wedding will be. A wedding is not to be like an hour or something. A wedding will go about 40 minutes really with everything. If there's going to be a song there, a song is going to last about 3 minutes. But by the time you set the song up and have the introduction and everything gets over, it's about 4.5 minutes that you have to allot for a song. At my brother-in-law's children's wedding, he married a singer. His son did, my nephew. And she sang 2 or 3 songs there. So that wedding goes on forever because every, 3 songs, that's 12, 14 minutes right there. And so just kind of know those kinds of things. And make transitions well as far as music goes. Now, they just happen automatically. But the time issue isn't a deal. And you make sure that you know about the time, and you have to tell that to the... usually the cameraman wants to know that. He's usually wanting to get out of there and get to the next, whatever he does. Also, right during the ceremony, it's okay to make comments to the couple. And it's even okay to be cute during the couple. People won't hear you. Now, you have a mic on there, but you can kill it too. But you can even say things, with your lips. You can just kind of lip things to them. Like, for example, the one girl had told me she had a problem with fainting, the bride. And so I look up at her and I see her start trembling and shaking right there. I think, oh, she's going down. The groom is looking at me like, oh no. And I'm looking at her and I go, and I lean up and I whisper to her, and this is during the song, and I lean up and whisper, go ahead and faint if you want to. When you wake up, you're going to be married to Bill, And so she kind of laughed, and it broke the intensity there, made her free. Now, I also had a wedding with about 7 men and 7 women on each of the bridesmaids, groomsmen. And when I did that, I looked down to the very end, a girl fainted. She fainted right out there and just was laying on the carpet. And then the maid of honor leans over to me and she says, don't worry, Pastor. She faints at every wedding. And I just didn't. I just kept on. Somebody came up. I don't know what they did, but they got her back up and she finished out the wedding. She looked a little pale to me, but she fainted. So things go on in weddings. You can talk about them. I had one time an outdoor wedding, and it had rained the night before, but it looked like it was clear. It looked okay. But the couple, as the girls came down to the place for the ceremony, their shoes stuck in the mud. The ground was soft. And it wasn't mud, but it was grass, but it was still it was soft, and so their shoes all stuck, and they all started tripping and falling. They didn't fall down, but they just kept walking, and they came up there and they did their wedding in their bare feet. And so I said something humorous about the barefooted women in the wedding, and it was just a wonderful moment. It was not a bad moment. It actually was a good moment that they remembered. And then make sure that in the ceremony that you're comfortable, that everything's going to go right, and nobody's going to do something unusual. If somebody does do something unusual or out of character, then you just make like it was normal. Sometimes, for example, they'll sing the wrong song at the wrong time, or they'll start doing something that's out of place. Don't worry about that. Just go with it. And it's not a worry. You don't ever say, does anyone know any reason why this woman should not be married to this man? Because I did have that to happen to me one time. A woman said that. I said that. And I did that back in 1972. And when I did that, somebody came running up out of the audience. And I thought she was going to say, I'm already married to that man, and I'm only like 23 years old, and she came running, and I thought, and she was crying, and I go, what is this about? She pulls a camera out and makes a picture. It was like somebody's a relative, and when she made the picture, it had the flash thing in the camera, and the flash blinded me, and I couldn't see my notes. So there were several minutes there that I was just kind of going what I could remember in the wedding. Don't ask that. It's not necessary to ask if anybody knows any reason why they shouldn't be. I never did that again, and that was in 1973. The last story is I had a lady and a man and wife. They were just lovely and young, but he was scared, and he was so scared. I guess, well, obviously he was, and but he seemed like an okay couple. And but it came just on time to the wedding, and he comes up and he says, Pastor, I cannot go through it. And I said, oh, I think you can. He says, no, I can't. And so what he do? He left the wedding. And so I had to go tell the bride, your husband is he left. She goes, no, I know, I'm not kidding. He left. And so here we were with no husband. And so she was crying now and all this. And so I said, I'll go out and tell everybody. I go out into the church, and I tell about 250 people, all sitting there looking at me smiling. And I said, I just want to let y'all know that there will not be a wedding today, that the husband decided not to do it. And when I did that, the husband, I couldn't be funny. I didn't know what to say. I tried to be, and they had to rehearse the ceremony set up for the after wedding party. They had gifts in there, and they had cake and tables all set up, and I don't remember if they had a band or not. I think they may have had a band. And then what they did was I just said, make sure. I said, you can have your gifts back. I was trying to be funny. Just let you know you can have your gifts back. And when I did, they got up and just went there and got their gifts and left. But it was a horrible moment for me. There was no way to be funny or humorous or whatever. I just had that to happen. All kinds of things can happen in a wedding, and there's nothing you can do about the bad things that happen, except for if you can make something humorous out of it. Somebody leaving the wedding is not funny. You can't do anything about that. But there are other things that can. Usually, you can turn it into something that's a little bit humorous. I even had one time. I did a wedding where one of the parties was Jewish, and he had a glass. And in the Jewish wedding, they put the glass in a stocking, and they lay it back there. And part of the wedding is for me to go over and stomp that glass and break it. And I got to that point of the wedding. I turned around. I walked back to the piece of glass and stomped on it. And when I did, it wouldn't break. And so I stomped it again and again. And finally, I think it was a trick. Somebody was playing a trick on my friend, on the person in the wedding. He was a great guy. Because somebody pulled out, I don't know if it was a hammer or a knife or something, and they reached their hand down there and they tapped it for me and broke it. These are the things that I have for a wedding. You have to play. A lot of it is just play by ear, and go through the ceremony and practice it, and make sure that everything happens as planned as you can. But don't worry, it will something go wrong, and make it as cute of a thing as you can, and make it fun day. Make it a glorious fun day. Thank you very much. I hope this is wonderful for you and you learned something from this experience.